The massive ship drifted silently through the dark void of space, invisible to any watching eyes. Inside, Elder Gray stood at the observation deck, his tall, slender form reflected in the transparent quantum glass. The Shadowvale had been his home for over 300 years, just as it had been home to countless generations of his people before him. The Drift were watchers, observers of the galaxy's many civilizations. Their giant ships moved unseen through space, collecting data and studying the rise and fall of countless species. Their quantum cloaking technology was perfect. No radar could detect them, no sensors could find them, and no eyes could see them. They were ghosts among the stars, exactly as they wished to be. Elder Gray watched the small blue-green planet spinning below, Earth as its inhabitants called it. The humans were an interesting species, quick to advance, quick to adapt, and always pushing forward. The Drift had watched them grow from simple tribes to a spacefaring civilization in what felt like the blink of an eye. "Elder, we have a situation." Commander Stone's voice broke through his thoughts. The younger Drift's skin showed traces of red, a sign of worry among their kind. "The human ship. It's changing course. It's heading straight for us." "Impossible," Gray said, but he felt his own skin beginning to pale. "Check the cloaking systems." "All systems are working perfectly," Stone replied, his long fingers dancing over the control panel. "But look at this data stream. They're sensors. They're pointed right at us." On the main screen, a small human vessel hung against the backdrop of stars. The horizon, according to their records. It was tiny compared to the Shadowvale, but it moved with purpose, adjusting its course degree by degree until it was on an intercept path. In the command center of the horizon, Captain Reed stood before his own view screen, staring at what appeared to be empty space. But the new quantum resonance scanner told a different story. Where his eyes saw nothing, the scanner showed a massive shape, bigger than any ship he'd ever encountered. "Dr. Wells," he called to his science officer, "are you sure about these readings?" The older man nodded, his eyes bright with excitement. "Absolutely, Captain. The quantum fluctuations are clear as day. There's something out there, something huge, and it's using technology far beyond anything we've ever seen." Reed studied the readings again. Their routine survey mission had just become anything but routine. The quantum resonance scanner was just a prototype, an experiment born from a late-night conversation between Dr. Wells and his team. They'd theorized that certain quantum states might be visible to human brainwaves in ways they weren't to traditional sensors. It had seemed like an interesting but impractical idea. Until now. Back on the Shadowvale, panic was beginning to spread. More Drift gathered on the command deck, their skin shifting through shades of red and white as they watched the human ship draw closer. For millennia, they had observed without being observed. The idea that they could be seen was more than frightening. It was world-shattering. "We should leave immediately," Stone insisted, his skin now a deep crimson. "We cannot risk contact." But Elder Gray held up a hand for silence. Something about this moment felt important, like a turning point in history. The humans had done what no other species had managed in all the time the Drift had watched the galaxy. They had seen the unseeable. "Prepare for contact," Gray said quietly, ignoring the shocked murmurs from his crew. "It seems the time of watching from shadows has come to an end." As both ships hung in the void, their crews watching and waiting, the galaxy held its breath. The age-old question of whether humanity was alone in the universe was about to be answered, but not in any way anyone had expected. The humans hadn't found aliens by looking up at the stars. They'd found them by being the first species to look at what everyone else had assumed was empty space. The next 6 hours aboard the Shadowvale were the most chaotic in Drift history. Crews rushed through the corridors, their skin flickering between shades of red and white, as they tried to understand how their perfect invisibility had failed. In the main hall, Elder Gray called an emergency meeting of the Council, while Commander Stone ordered all defense systems to be ready, just in case. The council chamber was filled with nervous energy as the 12 eldest drift gathered around the quantum blast table. Their reflections shimmered in its surface as they argued about what to do next. Some wanted to flee deeper into space, others suggested trying to communicate with the humans, and a few even proposed using their advanced weapons to eliminate the threat. "We have watched for 10,000 years," one council member said, her skin pale with fear. "If other species learn we exist, everything we have built will crumble." But Dr. Wells, aboard the Horizon, was already starting to understand what made humans different. He sat in his lab, surrounded by holographic displays showing brainwave patterns and quantum field measurements. Captain Reed stood behind him, watching as the scientist pointed to various graphs and readings. "Look here," Wells said, tapping one of the displays. "Human brains operate on a unique frequency. We can naturally detect quantum fluctuations that other species might miss. It's not our technology that sees them, it's us. The scanner just helps us focus what we're already capable of seeing." Reed rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "So you're saying we're naturally able to detect their cloaking technology. But why hasn't anyone noticed before?" "Because we weren't looking," Wells replied with a smile. "It's like those old magic eye pictures. The image is there all along, but you have to know how to look at it. Our brains can detect these quantum states naturally. We just needed the right tool to help us focus on what we were seeing." Meanwhile, on the Shadow Veil, Elder Gray stood alone in his private chamber, watching recordings of human history. The drift had collected countless hours of Earth's development, from the first cave paintings to their latest space missions. He noticed something interesting. Humans had always looked for patterns in seemingly empty space. They saw shapes in clouds, faces in random objects, and stories in the stars. Perhaps this ability to see what others couldn't was more significant than anyone had realized. The silence between the ships was broken when the Horizon sent out a simple message, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Reed of the Earth ship Horizon. We come in peace and wish to establish contact." The message echoed through the Shadow Veil's halls, causing more panic among the crew. Commander Stone burst into Elder Gray's chamber, his skin almost crimson with agitation. "They're trying to communicate. We must leave now. Before." "Before what?" Gray interrupted quietly. "Before we have to face the consequences of watching without helping. Before we have to explain why we stood by and observed as civilizations struggled and sometimes died." His skin shifted to a calm blue shade. "Perhaps this is exactly what we needed." Back on the Horizon, Dr. Wells made another discovery that made his hands shake with excitement. "Captain," he called over the ship's comm, "the quantum field around their ship. It's not just for hiding. I think it's also how they store data. If I'm reading this correctly, that ship is carrying the largest database of information I've ever seen." Reed's eyes widened as he understood the implications. This hidden species might have records of every major event in galactic history, solutions to problems humanity had struggled with for centuries, and knowledge that could change everything. As both ships hung in space, facing each other in this moment of truth, neither crew fully understood how much their worlds were about to change. The drift's perfect invisibility had a flaw they never considered. It failed against a species that had evolved to see patterns in chaos, to find meaning in emptiness, and to look beyond the obvious. The humans hadn't just seen through their cloak. They had seen through thousands of years of isolation and secrecy. Commander Stone paced the command deck of the Shadow Veil, his skin shifting between shades of red as reports kept coming in from other drift ships across the galaxy. More human vessels were detecting them. What had started with one ship had quickly spread as humans shared their discovery with their colonies and outposts. The perfect cloak that had hidden them for thousands of years was becoming useless. In his private chambers, Elder Gray reviewed the emergency messages from the other great ships. The Pattern, the Nightweave, and the Starcloak all reported the same thing. Humans were looking at them, seeing them, trying to talk to them. Some humans even waved at the empty space where they knew a drift ship was hiding. It would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. "We must do something," Stone insisted, bursting into Gray's chamber without announcing himself. His skin was now deep crimson. "3 more human ships have appeared near the horizon. They're surrounding us." But Gray remained calm, his skin a steady blue as he studied the sensor readings. "No," he said quietly. "They're not surrounding us. They're protecting their first ship. They're as afraid of us as we are of them." Aboard the Horizon, Captain Reed was dealing with his own challenges. The arrival of 3 more Earth ships had complicated the situation. The other captains were pushing for more aggressive action, arguing that any species advanced enough to hide completely must be a potential threat. "We need to force them to reveal themselves," Captain Mills of the defender ship Thunder argued over the comlink. "They could have weapons pointed at us right now." Reed shook his head. "If they wanted to attack, they could have done it any time in our history. Dr. Wells thinks they're observers, not invaders." In his lab, Dr. Wells was making even more remarkable discoveries. The quantum field around the alien ship wasn't just storing data, it was processing it in ways that defied normal physics. "It's like they've turned the fabric of space itself into one massive computer," he explained to Reed. "They must have records of everything they've ever observed. The knowledge in that ship could advance human science by centuries." The tension between the ships grew as more hours passed. The Drift Council remained locked in heated debate, their skin colors shifting rapidly as they argued. Some wanted to retreat to the far edges of the galaxy. Others suggested using their advanced weapons to eliminate all witnesses. A few brave voices called for opening dialogue with the humans. Elder Gray listened to them all, his ancient eyes watching the holographic displays showing the human ships. In all their years of watching, the Drift had documented countless first contact scenarios between other species. Some ended in peace, others in war, but none had ever started quite like this. "The humans are not aggressive by nature," he finally announced to the council, silencing their arguments. "They are curious. In all our observations of their history, their first reaction to the unknown has always been to try to understand it." Commander Stone stepped forward, his skin still showing traces of red, but now mixed with thoughtful purple. "But understanding us means exposing everything we are, everything we've done. How do we explain thousands of years of watching and never helping?" "Perhaps," Gray replied, "that is exactly what we need to explain. Perhaps it's time we faced the consequences of our choice to remain hidden." On the horizon, Dr. Wells noticed something changing in the quantum field readings. The massive alien ship was adjusting its energy patterns, shifting them in a way he hadn't seen before. "Captain," he called out, excitement clear in his voice, I think they're about to show themselves." The space between the human ships shimmered like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Slowly, the massive form of the Shadow Veil began to appear, its silver-black hull absorbing and reflecting starlight in impossible ways. The ship was beautiful, its design unlike anything humans had ever seen or imagined. As the drift ship revealed itself, both sides knew they had reached a point of no return. The Watchers could no longer hide in the shadows, and humanity could no longer pretend they were alone in the universe. Everything was about to change. Dr. Wells stood in the Shadow Veil's data center, his hands trembling as he looked at the holographic displays surrounding him. After 2 days of careful communication, the Drift had finally allowed a small human team aboard their ship. What he saw in their records made his heart race and his mind spin with possibilities. "This can't be right," he whispered, but the data didn't lie. The Drift had watched humanity's greatest struggles and had solutions for them all. Cures for diseases that still killed millions, clean energy systems that could have prevented climate change, and space travel technologies that would have let humans explore the stars centuries ago. Elder Gray stood nearby, his skin a deep shade of blue tinged with regrets. "We watched everything," he said quietly. "It is our way. To observe, to record, but never to interfere." On another deck, Captain Reed walked with Commander Stone, both leaders trying to understand each other's perspective. The drift ship was enormous, its corridors seeming to stretch forever. "Your people could have helped us so many times," Reed said, his voice carefully controlled. "Why didn't you?" Stone's skin shifted to a troubled purple. Imagine giving advanced weapons to primitive tribes, or showing space travel to people who hadn't invented the wheel. Every time we saw a species destroy itself with technology it wasn't ready for, our policy of non-interference was strengthened. Back in the data center, Dr. Wells found records that shook him to his core. The drift had watched countless civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy. Some had destroyed themselves with war, others with environmental disaster, and some had simply made the wrong choices at crucial moments in their development. "You have the combined knowledge of every species you've ever watched," Wells said, looking at Gray. "The successes, the failures, the solutions, the mistakes, everything." Gray's skin rippled with shades of blue and green. "And now we face a question we never expected to answer. What do we do with all this knowledge, now that we can no longer hide it?" The news of what the drift possessed spread quickly through the human ships. Some demanded immediate access to all their knowledge, arguing that withholding cures and solutions was criminal. Others feared that gaining too much advanced technology too quickly could be dangerous. Commander Stone watched the humans argue among themselves with growing concern. "See how they fight over this already," he said to Gray. "This is why we stayed hidden. This is why we only watch." But Gray noticed something the others missed. While some humans argued, others were already working with the drift crew, learning, sharing, finding middle ground. Dr. Wells and a young drift scientist named Light were already developing a system to safely share knowledge in ways that wouldn't overwhelm or destabilize human society. Captain Reed gathered all the human ship captains for a meeting on the horizon. The argument about what to do grew heated until Reed finally stood up. "We're missing the point," he said firmly. "The drift didn't just collect solutions, they collected warnings. They know exactly how other civilizations handled similar situations and what happened to them. Maybe instead of demanding everything at once, we should learn from their experience." The Drift Council was having a similar debate. Some members wanted to retreat, to find new ways to hide. Others saw an opportunity to finally do more than watch. "We have carried the weight of this knowledge for so long," one elder said, her skin glowing with a warm yellow hope. "Perhaps it's time we learn to share it." As humans and drift worked together on the Shadow Veil, both species began to understand something profound. The drift had perfect records, but had never acted on them. Humans had always acted, but often without enough knowledge to act wisely. Apart, both approaches had serious flaws. Together, they might find a better way. Dr. Wells stood at a window, watching Earth shine in the distance. In his hand, he held a data crystal containing the cure for a disease that had killed his wife years ago. The knowledge had been there all along, hidden in the shadows where no one could see it. Until now. Commander Stone stood before a secret gathering of drift officers in the lower decks of the Shadow Veil, his skin glowing deep red with determination. "We cannot let thousands of years of secrecy end like this," he said, his voice low but intense. "The humans must be stopped before they spread word of our existence across their worlds." Unknown to Stone, a young drift engineer named Spark had leaked word of the planned attack to Dr. Wells. As alarms blared through both human and drift ships, Elder Gray's skin paled with horror at the news. "They're going to use the quantum weapons," he told Captain Reed. "They think they can eliminate all witnesses and return to hiding." But Stone and his followers had made a crucial mistake. The same quantum technology that powered their weapons was visible to human brains, just like their cloaking systems. Dr. Wells worked frantically at his console, analyzing the energy readings. "Their weapons use quantum fields to tear apart matter," he explained to Reed. "But we can see the fields forming. We can track them." The human ships scattered as the first quantum torpedoes launched from hidden ports on the Shadow Veil. Stone had gathered supporters from other drift ships as well, and soon the space around Earth sparkled with deadly quantum energy. But the human ships moved with surprising precision, dodging attacks they shouldn't have been able to see coming. Impossible. Stone's skin flickered between red and white as his weapons missed again and again. The humans were treating his invisible quantum torpedoes like visible objects, predicting their paths and slipping between them with impossible accuracy. On the horizon's bridge, Reed watched his tactical display show the paths of the quantum weapons. Thanks to their unique perception and Wells's quick work, every human ship could now track the previously invisible attacks. "All ships, hold your fire," he ordered. "Defensive maneuvers only. Show them we're not their enemy." Inside the Shadow Veil, chaos erupted as the crew split between Stone's followers and those loyal to Elder Gray. The ship's corridors became battlegrounds, though thankfully the Drift's weapons were designed to disable rather than kill. Gray's skin shimmered with determination as he made his way to the main control room. "Our weapons are useless," Stone raged as another salvo missed the human ships. "They see everything." His skin had turned almost white with fear as he realized his perfect plan was falling apart. The humans weren't fighting back. They were just refusing to be hit, making his attacks look increasingly pointless. Dr. Wells made another discovery as he studied the quantum energy readings. "Captain," he called to Reed, "their weapon systems are draining power from their life support to maintain the quantum fields. If they keep firing, they'll kill themselves before they hurt us." Reed immediately opened a channel to the Shadow Veil. "Commander Stone, your weapons are destroying your own ship. Look at your power readings. The quantum fields are consuming everything. Stand down before you kill your own people." The message played throughout the Shadow Veil, and Stone's supporters began to waver as they saw the truth in the power readings. Their skin shifted from red to pale colors of fear and uncertainty. They had been so focused on maintaining their secrecy that they hadn't considered the cost. Elder Gray finally reached the control room, his aged frame moving with unexpected speed. "Look at them, Stone," he said, pointing to the human ships that still hadn't fired a single shot. "They could have attacked when they first saw us. They could be attacking now. But they choose not to. Perhaps it's time we learned something from them." The quantum weapons powered down as Stone's supporters stood down one by one. The humans had proven something extraordinary. Sometimes the most powerful response to violence was simply refusing to be its victim. Their ability to see the quantum weapons had turned the Drift's greatest strength into a weakness, but they had used that advantage only to defend, not destroy. As the crisis ended, both humans and Drift realized that this conflict had demonstrated something important. The Drift's tendency to hide and watch had left them unable to handle direct confrontation, while humanity's openness and adaptability had given them strength that no amount of advanced technology could match. The observation deck of the Shadow Veil became a meeting ground as humans and Drift gathered to find a way forward. The Earth hung like a blue jewel in the distance, while Drift ships emerged from hiding one by one, their quantum cloaks dropping away like morning mist. Elder Gray's skin shimmered with calm blue tones as he faced Captain Reed. "Your people could have destroyed us," Gray said quietly. "You saw our weapons coming. You could have fired back when we were vulnerable. Why didn't you?" Reed looked out at the stars, choosing his words carefully. "Because this wasn't about winning a fight. It was about proving we could be trusted. Sometimes the best way to make peace is to show you won't take advantage of an enemy's weakness." In another part of the ship, Dr. Wells worked with the young Drift engineer Spark, who had warned them about Stone's attack. They were studying the quantum technology that had both hidden and nearly destroyed the Drift. Wells had made an interesting discovery. "Look at this," he said, pointing to his readings. "Your quantum fields don't just hide things. They store and process information, but they're limited by trying to stay completely hidden. If you modify them to work with visible light instead of against it, you could make them thousands of times more efficient." Spark's skin flickered with surprised yellows and greens. "You mean by trying so hard to be invisible, we've actually been holding ourselves back." The idea seemed to shock the young engineer, but also excited him. His people had been living in shadows for so long, they never considered there might be benefits to being seen. Commander Stone sat in detention, his skin a muted gray of defeat. Elder Gray visited him, not with anger but with curiosity. "Tell me, old friend," Gray asked, "what frightened you more, that the humans could see us, or that we might have to change?" Stone looked up, his gray skin showing traces of thoughtful blue. "We watched so many civilizations destroy themselves after gaining too much knowledge too quickly. I thought I was protecting us all. But perhaps," he paused, his skin rippling with new colors, "perhaps we were so busy watching others' mistakes that we couldn't see our own." On the bridge of the horizon, Reed received messages from Earth. The news of the drift's existence had spread, and the reactions were mixed. Some were frightened, others angry about the years of secret observation, but many were fascinated and eager to learn. Reed shared these messages with Gray, holding nothing back. "Your people are very direct," Gray observed, watching humans debate and discuss the situation openly. "We have spent so long trying to keep secrets, we forgot how freeing the truth can be." Dr. Wells made another breakthrough as he studied the drift's database. "Their records aren't just history," he explained to Reed and Gray. "They're a roadmap of choices and consequences. They show exactly what happened when civilizations faced challenges like the ones we're facing now. We can learn from every success and failure they've recorded." The Drift Council convened again, but this time with human representatives present. The council chamber's quantum blast table showed images from both species' histories, human exploration and drift observation, human conflicts and drift studies, human innovations and drift knowledge. "We offer you a partnership," Elder Gray announced to the human delegates. "Not just our knowledge, but a chance to help us learn what you already know, how to be part of the galaxy instead of just watching it." Reed stepped forward. "And we offer you something in return, a new perspective. You've spent so long making sure no one could see you, you forgot how to see yourselves clearly. Together, we can find a balance between observation and action, between caution and progress." As the two species talked, a young drift child wandered onto the observation deck, her skin swirling with curious patterns of yellow and blue. She pressed her hand against the quantum blast window, and a human child did the same from the other side. They couldn't understand each other's words yet, but they could see each other clearly. And sometimes, that was enough to begin building bridges. 1 year had passed since the day humans first saw the invisible ships in their skies. The Shadowville hung in orbit above Earth, but it looked very different now. Its hull gleamed in the sunlight instead of hiding in quantum shadows, and ships from both species moved freely around it. The great vessel had become a symbol of change, a bridge between watching and doing. Dr. Wells stood in his new laboratory, which combined human and drift technology. The quantum blast walls shifted between transparency and displaying data as he worked. His team included both humans and drift, all working together to unlock the mysteries of the universe. The young drift engineer Spark worked beside him, his skin glowing with excited yellows as they made new discoveries. "Look at this," Spark said, pointing to their latest project. "By combining your visible light processing with our quantum fields, we've made a system that's 100 times more powerful than anything we had before. We needed both approaches all along." In the great hall of the Shadowville, Elder Gray and Captain Reed stood before a gathering of both species. Their year of careful cooperation had led to this moment. "Today," Gray announced, his skin shimmering with proud blues and greens, "we launched the first joint mission of our peoples." A new ship waited in the Shadowville's launching bay. Smaller than the great drift vessels, but larger than human ships, it combined the best of both technologies. Its hull could shift between visibility and quantum stealth, and its sensors were designed to see everything from normal space to quantum fluctuations. Commander Stone, who had spent months helping to design new safety protocols for sharing advanced technology, stepped forward. His skin now showed the calm blues of someone who had found a new purpose. This ship represents what we can achieve together. The humans taught us that being seen doesn't mean being vulnerable. Sometimes it means being stronger. The joint crew boarded their new vessel. Humans and Drift worked side by side at consoles designed for both species. Reed smiled as he watched Dr. Wells take his position as Chief Science Officer, while Spark served as Quantum Engineering Lead. The ship's name, written in both human and Drift languages, gleamed on its hull, Bridge. Before their departure, Elder Gray shared the ship's mission with everyone watching. There are many species in our galaxy who need help but are afraid to ask. We spent too long watching their struggles. Now, we will do more. This ship will seek them out, not to hide and observe, but to offer friendship and assistance. The Bridge's engines hummed to life, combining human fusion power with Drift quantum fields. As it prepared to leave, Reed looked at his mixed crew. For centuries, humans looked up at the stars and asked if we were alone. The Drift looked down at us and wondered if they should make contact. It took us seeing the unseen to finally bring us together. In the observation room, the young Drift child who had first reached out to her human counterpart now stood with a group of children from both species. They were part of the first joint education program, learning each other's ways. Their teacher smiled as the children pressed their hands against the quantum glass, watching the bridge prepare to depart. Remember, the teacher said, every great journey begins with opening your eyes to something new. The bridge moved gracefully away from the shadow veil, carrying its crew toward distant stars. As it reached its jump point, its quantum fields shimmered, not to hide but to power its journey into deep space. The ship disappeared in a flash of light, visible to all who watched, proud to be seen. Back on the shadow veil, Dr. Wells looked at Earth through the quantum glass windows. A year ago, he had discovered the flaw in the Drift's perfect invisibility. Now he understood that it hadn't been a flaw at all. It had been an opportunity. Sometimes, the universe had to push people together, even if it meant making the invisible visible. As more ships were built and more crews trained, humans and Drift worked together to face the future. They had learned that true strength didn't come from hiding or from fighting, but from combining their different ways of seeing the world. The Watchers had stepped out of the shadows, and the ones who saw them had welcomed them into the light.